Hello, everyone. Welcome to Small Talk. Well, my guest today is a screenwriter. She's also a fiction writer and a professor from Toronto, Ontario. Time to meet Kathryn Mockler. Welcome to the show, Kathryn.
Hi, thank you for having me,
You're welcome.
Nancy.
Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
I think so, Mockler. It's
Okay,
just
good.
Mockler,
Great.
yeah.
So, did the writing did you start writing before you became a professor, or what came first?
Oh, most definitely the writing came first. I started writing when I was in university at Concordia University. Yeah.
Okay, that's in Montreal, right?
Yeah, that's in Montreal. I grew up in London, Ontario, and then went to Concordia University, and my best friend and I were roommates, and she was in the creative writing program. And in my second year, I took a creative writing course and applied to the program, and then never really, I hadn't really been very good or interested in school until I took creative writing. And then I just
You found
and
something.
it wasn't even particularly good. I was a solid B um, back then, but I just loved it. I didn't really care what mark I got, and I just liked doing it. So I never stopped.
So, have you had books published?
I've had let's see, I've had three full-length collections published with different publishers, and then two chapbooks as well published, and then I just um, recently published a short fiction collection with Book Hug Press last year. Yeah.
Okay, so do you have any of those there? I should have asked that at the beginning.
Oh yeah, I have the new book Anecdotes
Okay,
is my most recent, and yeah, that was published in September of 2023, and it's a collection of short fictions of varying lengths, a lot of flash fiction, and yeah, some sort of experimental fiction as well.
where could people find your books if they want to read them?
Well, you can go to Book Hug Press and order directly. If you're in Canada, it's always great to support the press. You can order from any independent bookstore in your area. Um, and of course, there's always the library.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, there's a really quite a different process from fictional writing and screenwriting, right?
hmm
So,
Oh yeah, so part of my journey was after I finished at Concordia, I went to the University of British Columbia, where I majored in three genres: fiction, poetry, and screenwriting. And then after that, I went to the Canadian Film Center, where I had some short films made. So I've always written multi-genre in multi-genres, and sometimes I'll take a poem and adapt that into a screenplay. And yeah, so it's all sort of connected for me,
right.
actually. Yeah.
So when you're writing, whether it's a nonfiction or a screenwriting, like what is it that inspires you?
Oh, that's such a interesting and difficult question to answer. I I don't know. I recently said in an interview that I think my writing is very impulsive and compulsive. So I have to do it.
Mhm.
I don't do it all the time. I'm not one of those writers that writes every day when I'm teaching. It's very difficult for me to summon that unless I have a deadline. But I kind of get an idea and then I sort of run with it. And so I'm often working on like 5 to 10 projects at once. And I pick them up and put them down.
Mhm.
And so I'm never like without something to write, but I'm often working on multiple things at once. And so if I get bored of an idea, then I can go to something else and work on that.
Now, speaking of deadlines, like I'm a person that's always worked better when they have a deadline.
hmm
That's not you.
Yes, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. It
Now you
really
have to buckle
helps.
down and do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult. I run a Substack called Send My Love to Anyone, which I started in I think the January 2021. And I I wasn't doing it to make money, but I just thought, oh, I'll just put on the paid thing. And if somebody wants to support what I'm doing, that's great. And then I have guests and I invite them to write and then I can pay them. And as soon as somebody like signed up for that, then I was like, oh, I'm going to have to do this every month, so that kind of put a deadline because I'd made a commitment, like something's going to come out of this newsletter at least once a month. So it's very helpful to have deadlines. That's why, sometimes I'll take even a course in something I teach because I just want the deadline.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I was going to
Yeah.
ask about that. You're a professor at where are you a professor in Toronto?
Yeah, no, I actually live in Victoria. I was living in Toronto and I used to teach at the University of Western Ontario as a sessional instructor for 17 years actually. And then I in 2020 I got a job at the University of Victoria. So
Oh,
I moved there 2 years ago, but my husband still lives here. So he's eventually going to move with me, but right
okay.
now.
So you're
So
currently
I'm in Toronto for the summer. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand that because I'm thinking,
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird situation.
wait a minute now, we still did this hour difference. How did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. So
That makes sense.
but I work and live in Victoria.
Okay, so and what is it you teach?
I teach screenwriting and fiction.
So what is it about now? Okay, so you're doing it. Obviously, you know how to do it, but not everybody that can do things can also teach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is it about the teaching that you're able to provide to students?
Well, I think now it's that I've done it for almost over 20 years. So that's one. That's, I've been doing it a long time. But I actually think for me, I was a really terrible student. When I was 13, I was told by a guidance counselor that I would never, at a school in London, Ontario, that
Mm,
I would never be able to get into university. And so fortunately, and to take a different stream and so fortunately, my mom's like, just take the academic stream if it doesn't matter if you don't do well. And of course, I didn't do well in
mhm,
grade 9 and 10. Um, but then I had to have, then I had jobs that I didn't like, and I was like, oh, actually, maybe I do want to go to university. And then, sort of did better in grade 12 and 13. So the long story short is that I know what it's like for things to come difficultly to a student, and I know what it's like to not be motivated. I also have ADHD, so I think that helps with teaching as well. I kind of I'm just able to empathize with the learner's point of view as someone who had difficulty learning. So
mm, okay. Now,
so
through all of your years of teaching, did you have the students that had just stood out as far as their ability was concerned?
Um, I do. I'm someone, I tell my students I don't actually believe in talent. But there's always a student where an assignment or a particular story idea that they have really resonates with them, and we don't have a lot of feedback and it just kind of comes out amazingly. That does happen sometimes. Or even if they're someone who struggled a bit, but then they take the feedback and they're really able to polish it.
Right.
All those things are really exciting for the student, but it's actually been my experience that the students where creative writing comes the easiest to them don't often go on. It's the ones who struggle
Ah,
that go on. Like, I've run into students, the student who I thought, oh, you're going to be a screenwriter, like your scripts seem to just fly out of you. And, I met this student on the subway and they were doing something else. They were taking a course in advertising or something. I was shocked that they didn't go into screenwriting.
right.
But yeah, I think, yeah, not everybody wants to do it. It's a big life sacrifice, and I don't know um if it totally is determined on the end result. I think there are people who just struggle and they like the struggle, and I kind of feel like I was like that. Like as I said, when I started out, I was pretty mediocre but I just loved it and I didn't really care. And so it made me not fragile to get feedback. And so then I was able to learn. Whereas I think if it comes easily and then you get criticism, it can be harder to take that criticism, especially in screenwriting, because you do have to be able to take feedback. Like,
Right.
there are things about storytelling that kind of need to be there for audiences. It's a little bit different than poetry or fiction. And
Yeah.
if you can't take that feedback, it would be very hard to, kind of go on in that field. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now, you were also a former lecturer at the University of Western Ontario, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what, oh, it's all, and again, it was to do with writing?
Yeah, it was the same thing. It was but I taught more genres there. I taught experimental writing, poetry, multi-genre writing, and screenwriting.
What is experimental writing?
So, and the experimental writing course I taught it in a way that it could be any genre or medium. So they could make videos, they could make sound pieces, they could do text pieces. I think one student did a sculpture once.
Oh,
And it's just sort of challenging um, sort of the traditional ideas of what a piece of literature is, what literature can be, and what its possibilities are. Sometimes students used found material. I had them do this neat exercise where it was like they had to use found material, but it had to be autobiographical. So sometimes students would make poems out of their text messages, and
oh, cool.
they always had to get consent, but
Right.
from whoever's words they were. But and yeah, so just sort of like saying, oh, I had I had one student who worked at a bookstore, and every time someone would come and ask about a book, I guess chapters, they used to have a sheet of paper that they would hand them, so that at the end of the day there were all these sheets of papers with the titles of books, and then the student created an artwork out of that. So yeah, so just a really fun class, sort of challenging what a story can be, trying to write a story without characters or without a plot and things like that. Yeah, it's
Oh,
very
wow.
fun. Yeah.
That sounds challenging for sure.
Yeah, and this was fun.
Yeah. So currently, are you working on anything? Or what? Well, what a silly question.
Yeah. Sort of what
Let me
I
phrase that.
sure.
What are you working on currently?
Yeah, I sort of I'm working on multiple things as I usually do. So I'm working on an experimental video series that kind of incorporates text from some of my other works. And I'm working on a novel as well, and then continuing to work on short stories. So yeah, again, I probably have, and I have some feature film script ideas that I'm working on as well. So I probably have about 10, 10 projects that I pick away at, and eventually one gets done. That's sort of my process.
I'm a little bit like that. Not usually 10, but I have
Yeah.
more than one thing going at the same time, you know?
Yeah.
Put
Yeah.
this down for a while and work on this
Yeah.
or whatever it is that hits my fancy at the moment, right?
Hmm.
But some of the challenge writing, I just think it sounds so much fun, really. You know, if you tell, okay, like if you were to say to somebody, okay, you've got all these texts with the permission, of course, make
Yeah.
one. It's like, oh my goodness, how much fun could that
It
be?
is. Yeah. And they also do like Google searches and things, like you make a poem out of a Google search and things like that. Yeah. As long as you get consent from a
Yeah.
person, if it's a person in your life. Like I was really big on consent, because
Mm.
that kind of writing can be exploitative if you don't get consent. Or you can use like a found text, and then you kind of and that can also be the surface of like I had one student, I think they took the strategic plan of the university and then created sort of a critical work about what the university says they're doing versus what they really do. So yeah, there's ways it can get quite political as well.
Um, so if there's something that you haven't done that you would like to do, what would that be? If you could think of something,
Like in creatively.
anything in any way at all.
Um, Probably I would like to write a play, because a lot of my work is very dialogue driven, but I'd never actually written a play before. It just either goes into poetry, fiction, or screenplay. So
Writing a play, I mean, I just did a simple kids play, and even that, there's
yeah,
a lot of detail that you have to put in.
yeah, yeah,
So that's
yeah.
interesting.
That'd be fun. Yeah, like creatively, I think. I mean, of course, I'd like to travel and stuff like that. That's
Um,
where would be my interest. But yeah, and to creatively, I would like to try and write a play and, maybe get a feature film that I've written, produced. Is I've had short films produced and I make my own experimental films, but it would be nice to have a feature film produced.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for your short films that were produced, how did you find a producer?
Well, the kind of I there's a program at the Canadian Film Center. It was I think at the time it was called the Screenwriters Lab. And it was through that program that I met people. And then that program funded a couple of features that I had written, and then they were made by other directors. So that was kind of sort of a very practical program that embedded sort of the whole, like, studios would donate stuff. So you basically got like a film that was worth $100,000 in donations, and union actors would work for free and stuff like that. So that was a really great experience, and that's where I got my first two films made. And then after that, I had made some connections and with people outside of the program, and also that I had met in the program, and then we made stuff after that. So
Okay, so now here's
yeah.
a question about with your screenplays. How could people find out about them? Like, where would they get that information?
Well, it's the thing about screenplays is they're usually distributed, so they're not really available online.
Okay.
Um, and but yeah, and just my experimental films, they are just on my Vimeo, which you can get through my website,
Okay, so you do have
kathrynmockler.com.
a website. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
kathrynmockler.com.
Yeah.
So everything's there that people need.
Everything's there that can be accessed. Yeah.
Well, that's really great. So I think we've covered everything.
Yeah.
Unless there's something else something I should have asked that I haven't.
No, no, I can't think of anything. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, just stay on camera then. So everybody, you've been listening to Kathryn Mockler. I'm going to include her website so you can look it up, find out the title of her books, and if you want to order her books, or her, what was it, her experimental
Videos. Yeah.
news. Yeah. So everything's there for you. So hopefully you will do that because if someone's taking the time to write stuff, it's really nice to have people that are going to want to read them.
Yeah.
So in the meantime,
Excellent.
everybody, thank you very much for watching the show. I hope you continue to do so. Take care, everybody, and peace out.